It was 3 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon when my life split clean down the middle. I was standing in my garage, hands stained with grease, after a day repairing a walk-in cooler for a downtown restaurant. My phone buzzed on the workbench. The subject line read, "We need to talk." I almost ignored it. My wife, Gabriela, had been in Peru for 3 weeks on some kind of spiritual retreat. We'd exchanged a few short messages, nothing alarming. I wiped my hands on a rag, opened the email, and read the first line. "I'm done. I'm going to take what's mine, including your investments and your mother's golden rings." At first I actually laughed, thinking it had to be a joke. But the words sat there, sharp and real, and the laugh died in my throat. Those rings weren't just jewelry. They were the only physical pieces left of my mother, who had passed 4 years earlier. 2 simple gold bands, one engagement, one wedding, worn so long they had molded to the shape of her fingers. Gabriela knew what they meant to me. I stared at the phone, then typed back without thinking. "You might want to double-check with your spiritual guide before doing that." I hit send, put the phone face down, and stood there among the smell of oil and cold metal, trying to process what had just happened. Nothing in 8 years of marriage had prepared me for that sentence. The rest of the day blurred. I drove to a service call, signed invoices, talked to clients, everything on autopilot. But beneath the routine, there was this hollow vibration. Something irreversible had begun. If you'd met us a year earlier, you would have thought we were solid. I was 45, running my own commercial refrigeration company in Salt Lake City. Gabriela was 32, a yoga instructor with a quick smile and that calm voice that could slow my heartbeat after a long day. We met 9 years ago at a farmer's market. She sold handmade soaps. I was buying fruit for my mother, who was already sick back then. When I came back the next weekend, she remembered my name. That's how it started. A year later, we married. Small ceremony, nothing fancy. My mother was too weak to attend, so after the vows, we brought the celebration to her hospital room. She held our hands together and whispered to Gabriela, "Take care of him." Gabriela promised she would. 6 months later, my mother was gone. She left me the house, the business, and those 2 gold rings. Gabriela asked if she could wear one on her right hand to feel close to Mom. I said yes. At the time it felt beautiful, like Mom's love carried on between us. Life rolled forward quietly. I expanded the company, hired 2 employees. Gabriela taught classes at a studio downtown, came home glowing from meditation and stretching. We bought a rental property and began talking about kids, though somehow it always stayed talk. Maybe we both liked the idea of later. When I look back now, I can see where the cracks began. It was small things. She stopped asking about my day, spent more time scrolling her phone. I'd suggest dinner out and she'd say she was tired. I told myself it was normal. People go through phases. But the truth was simpler. We were already drifting, and I was too busy fixing other people's machines to notice our own was failing. The change started with one of her students, a woman named Vanessa, who had just returned from a transformational retreat in South America. Gabriela came home that night buzzing with new vocabulary: healing, awakening, shedding ego, expanding consciousness. I listened, half interested, half amused. When she asked if I believed that plants could show you the truth, I said, "Maybe the truth is that plants belong in the ground." She didn't laugh. Soon it was weekend meditation workshops, then silent yoga getaways. She said she felt lighter each time, more connected. I noticed the credit card statements but kept quiet. What's a few $100s for her peace of mind? Then one night she showed me a brochure, Ayahuasca Retreat, Sacred Jungle of Peru, Reconnect with Your Authentic Self, 4 weeks. Price tag, $6,000. She told me this might be what finally heals the distance between us. That line got me, so I paid. Maybe it would help. Maybe I was too rigid, too practical. For the next month, she prepared like a pilgrim. New journals, white cotton clothes, herbal detoxes. She talked to someone online named Javier, the retreat's spiritual facilitator. Every night, she sat at her laptop smiling at the screen, saying he was helping her set intentions. I didn't like it, but I said nothing. A week before her flight, she told me she wanted to go alone. "I think you judged the experience," she said. "This is something personal." That sentence should have told me everything. The night before she left, I cooked dinner. Steak, her favorite. We ate in silence. I asked if everything was okay. She smiled in that faraway way and said, "Everything's perfect. This trip is exactly what I need. I love you." She kissed me, went to bed early, and the next morning she was gone. I told myself it was temporary, that she'd come home renewed, grateful, closer. But deep down, something already felt off, like I'd handed my marriage to a stranger in a white linen shirt on another continent. After that email arrived 3 weeks later, I drove home in a fog of disbelief. I went straight to our bedroom. Her jewelry box sat open, lined with felt impressions where the rings used to be. The safe in the closet was unlocked, missing bank statements, the rental property deed copy, even a USB drive with financial backups. I dialed her number, straight to voicemail. Again, still voicemail. That's when I noticed the laptop on her dresser. She never went anywhere without it. I opened the lid. It was still on, no password. Her Gmail was open. There were dozens of messages from someone named Javier Moreno. The first few were businesslike, arrival times, packing lists. But then the tone changed. "You're trapped in a loveless marriage," he wrote. "He's holding you back. You deserve more." I scrolled further. "You have to release attachment to material things. The rings carry energy. You must free yourself by offering them in ceremony." My heart pounded. Those rings weren't material things. They were my mother's life looped into gold. Then I found something worse. Email drafts about our accounts. Javier coached her on what to say to a lawyer, how to transfer property, even how to phrase an emotional letter to make herself look like the victim. One of his last messages read, "Bring everything that ties you to the past. After this ceremony, you'll be free and we can build something real together." It felt like ice poured through my chest. For an hour, I sat in the dark, scrolling, reading my wife's private revolution. I wasn't losing her to enlightenment. I was losing her to a con. When the shock settled, I started thinking mechanically, the way I do when a compressor fails. If I could trace the leak, maybe I could stop the damage. I decided to learn everything I could about Javier Moreno. The first thing I did was type his name into Google. Javier Moreno. Within minutes, I found him. Not a spiritual healer, not even a licensed counselor. Just a failed real estate agent from Miami with 2 restraining orders from ex-girlfriends. He had reinvented himself after bankruptcy, trading houses for healing. His website showed photos of him in white robes, arms spread wide beneath jungle canopies, selling enlightenment at $5,000 a seat. My stomach twisted as I read reviews. One woman said he pressured her to stay longer at the retreat and then borrowed $10,000 that was never returned. Another claimed he told her to release her ego by leaving her husband. All of them used the same words: manipulative, controlling, charming. The deeper I dug, the worse it became. He wasn't a mystic. He was a predator dressed in spiritual clothes. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, but predators like him don't come at you head on. They whisper through the person you trust. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my mother's voice, take care of her, and wondering what she'd think of this mess. I kept seeing Gabriella's hand wearing one of those gold rings, smiling like she meant forever. By morning, the sadness turned into anger, cold, organized anger. I made coffee, sat down at my desk, and started making a plan. If Gabriella thought she could walk away with my business and my mother's legacy, she was wrong. I called my lawyer, Peter. We'd gone to high school together. I knew he'd tell me the truth, even if it hurt. Peter's office smelled of old leather and burnt coffee. He listened without interrupting while I laid everything out, the emails, the missing rings, the investment accounts. When I finished, he leaned back and steepled his fingers. "Dylan," he said, "she's planning to file for divorce and go after your assets. That email was her opening shot." I nodded. "Can we stop it?" He thought for a moment. "We can file first. That gives us the upper hand. But Utah's a no-fault state. Everything you accumulated during the marriage counts as community property. The only exception is if we can prove she acted in bad faith. Fraud, theft, manipulation." "I have emails," I said. "Dozens." "They'll help, but a judge might see that as just a marriage falling apart. We'll need a pattern, financial transfers, intent, maybe third-party testimony." "So what do I do now?" He started listing steps: freeze the joint accounts, file a police report for the stolen rings, gather every statement, every text, every email. "Don't confront her directly again," he warned. "Let me handle communication. If she's already being coached, anything you say will get twisted." I left his office with a folder of forms and a hollow ache in my stomach. It felt strange, having to treat the woman I loved like a potential criminal, but there was no other choice. That afternoon, I tried to work. I replaced a thermostat in a hotel kitchen, but my mind wasn't on it. Each click of the screwdriver echoed like a question. How much more was she planning to take? Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message read, "This is Vanessa. We need to talk." I called immediately. She answered on the second ring. "Dylan?" Her voice sounded uneasy, like someone confessing a secret. "Yes, what's going on?" "I don't know how to say this," she began, "but Gabriela, she's not coming back, not the way you think." "What does that mean?" "Javier's been doing this for years. He targets women, usually married, usually financially stable. He tells them they're trapped, that they need to break free. Then he convinces them to bring money, jewelry, whatever they can access. Once he has it, he disappears." I clenched the phone so hard my hand hurt. "How do you know?" "Because he tried it with me," she said quietly. 3 years ago. I lost 30,000 before I realized what was happening." She took a breath. "When Gabriela started talking about him, I tried to warn her. She said I was negative energy. I let it go, but when she told me about the rings and the accounts, I couldn't stay silent. She's planning to send him $50,000 next week." "From our investment account?" "Yes, she has the logins. She thinks it's an investment in their new retreat. He's telling her they'll start a business together in Peru." I closed my eyes. My pulse felt like static in my ears. "Thank you for telling me." "Please be careful," Vanessa said. "He's manipulative. If he knows you're interfering, he'll turn her against you completely." After the call, I sat in my truck staring at the steering wheel for a long time. I wasn't just fighting for money anymore. I was fighting for what was left of Gabriela's sanity. That night, I turned on her laptop again. The browser had her email password saved. I logged in and waited. If she really planned to transfer the money, I'd see it happen. 2 days later, it came. An email thread between her and Javier popped to the top of the inbox. "Javier, transfer 50,000 tomorrow. I found the perfect property for our retreat. We need to move fast." "Gabriela, I'll do it first thing in the morning." I stared at the screen, heat rising behind my eyes. $50,000. That was 10 years of long nights of crawling through freezer rooms in January. I opened my own investment account, changed the password, and transferred every cent into a new account she couldn't access. Then I sat back and waited. The next morning my phone rang. Her number, for the first time in weeks. "Dylan, there's a problem with the investment account." Her tone was controlled but tight. "What kind of problem?" "I can't access it. The login isn't working." "That's strange," I said evenly. "Did you try resetting the password?" "I did. It still won't let me in. I need access to that account today." "Why?" A long pause. "That's none of your business. It's our money, Gabriela. That makes it very much my business." She hung up. 10 minutes later, she called again, her voice higher now. "You locked me out on purpose." "I protected our assets," I said. "There's a difference." "You have no right." "I have every right," I said quietly. "Especially when you're about to wire $50,000 to a con artist in Peru." Silence. I could hear her breathing, fast, panicked. "How do you—" "I know about Javier," I cut in. "I know about the emails. I know you took my mother's rings. And I know you were planning to drain our accounts and disappear." For a few seconds, there was only static on the line. Then she hung up again. I sat back, exhaled slowly, and realized something. The fear that had been eating at me for weeks was gone. In its place was a strange calm, the kind you feel when a storm finally breaks and you know exactly which way the wind is blowing. She would call her lawyer next. I was sure of it. And I was ready. The next morning, my lawyer, Peter, called. "She filed a response already," he said. "Her attorney claims you're trying to sabotage her spiritual growth." I almost laughed. "So that's the official defense now, spiritual growth?" "Let them use it," Peter said. "We'll counter with evidence." He'd already filed motions to freeze joint assets and recover stolen property. He was also preparing to send the emails to Peruvian authorities. "Turns out," he continued, "they've been investigating Javier Moreno for months. We might actually be helping them build a case." That night, unable to sleep, I logged once more into Gabriela's inbox. A new email from Javier was waiting. "The authorities came to the property today asking questions. We need to move. Pack everything. I'll arrange transport tomorrow." I scrolled. "Gabriela, what about the retreat? What about our plans?" "Javier, change of plans. We're going to Costa Rica. I have contacts there. We leave tomorrow night." My pulse kicked up. I took screenshots of everything, dates, times, IP addresses, and sent them to Peter, then directly to the Peruvian authorities' tip line. By morning, it was all over the news in Lima. Local police raided a jungle retreat operated by American national Javier Moreno. They found bank ledgers, multiple passports, false IDs, even signed contracts from clients who had transferred tens of thousands of dollars. 15 victims so far. Gabriela was among those detained. When Peter called me that morning, I was eating breakfast. Oatmeal, black coffee, nothing fancy. "She's in custody," he said. I just nodded, staring at the spoon in my hand. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like the end of a fever dream, the kind that leaves you drenched, shaking, but awake. By the next day, Javier was formally charged with fraud, money laundering, and running an unlicensed business. Gabriela, they said, was being questioned. A few days later, Peter called again. "She's asking for help," he said. "What kind of help?" "Money for a lawyer down there. She says she's not involved in his operation, that she's a victim too." I stared at the floor of my workshop. She made her choices. Tell her no. Peter hesitated. "You sure, Dylan? She's still your wife, technically." "Not for long," I said. When I hung up, I tried to focus on work, compressor repairs, invoices, customer calls, but the noise inside my head was louder than any engine. That night, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. "Dylan," she said softly. Her voice cracked. "Please, I made a mistake. I didn't know what Javier was really doing. I need help. You took my mother's rings." Silence, then a broken sob. "I know, I'm sorry. I'll give them back, I swear." "Where are they?" "Javier has them. He said we'd use them in a ceremony, but he sold them. I don't know where they are now." Something inside me deflated. Anger, grief, everything. "My mother's rings," I repeated quietly. "You sold them to fund his escape." "I didn't know. I can't help you, Gabriela." "Dylan, please." I hung up. For a long time, I sat in the dark, thinking about the loops those rings had made. Around my mother's fingers, around Gabriela's lies, now lost somewhere in a stranger's pocket. 3 weeks later, Peter called again. "She's being released," he said. "Authorities determined she was manipulated, not complicit. They're not pressing charges." "Good for her," I said flatly. She flew home the next day. When she landed, she called. "Can you pick me up?" "No." "Dylan, I have nowhere else to go. You have family in California." "I can't face them. That's not my problem anymore." She stayed with Vanessa for a week. Then Vanessa called me. "She needs to get her things from the house," she said gently. "Fine," I told her. "I'll leave them on the porch." I spent that evening boxing everything. Clothes, yoga mats, books, the framed photo from our wedding that she'd left behind. I left the boxes outside the front door with the house key on top. The next day, when I came home, they were gone. A month later, Peter finalized the divorce papers. The judge reviewed everything, the emails, the transfers, the testimony from Vanessa, and ruled that Gabriela had acted in bad faith. She got half of what was left in our joint checking account, $3,000, and her personal belongings. Nothing else. I kept the business, the house, and the rental property. She moved back to California, started working part-time at a coffee shop. Javier got 5 years in a Peruvian prison. The authorities recovered some money from his accounts, but not much. The rings were never found. 6 months passed. I sold the rental property, didn't need the income, didn't want the reminder. I used the proceeds to expand my company, hired 2 more technicians, bought a second truck, and took on bigger contracts. Work filled the space where anger used to live. The routine saved me. You can't spiral when you're tightening bolts and troubleshooting condenser coils. One Friday afternoon, a small package arrived at my office. No return address. Inside was a velvet pouch. When I opened it, 2 gold rings slid into my palm. They weren't my mother's, different engraving, different weight, but they looked close enough to steal my breath. There was a note inside. "I'm sorry I couldn't recover the originals. These belong to my grandmother. I thought you should have them. Claire?" Claire was one of the women I'd spoken to months earlier, the one from Oregon who'd lost $60,000 to Javier. She had testified in the case and helped Peter gather evidence. We'd stayed in touch a little, mostly to exchange updates. Now she had sent me this, 2 small circles of kindness to replace what greed had destroyed. I held them for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The nights spent wondering how things had gone so wrong. The love that turned into silence, the silence into deception, and the deception into evidence. I placed the rings in a small wooden box on my dresser, next to my mother's photo. Not as replacements, but as reminders. Goodness still exists, even after ruin. A year later, I met someone new. Her name was Fiona. We met in the hardware store, of all places. She was standing in the tool aisle, frowning at a shelf of drills. I joked, "Depends if you're hanging curtains or building a time machine." She laughed, the kind of real, unfiltered laugh I hadn't heard in years. We talked about renovation projects for 20 minutes before I realized she was giving me her number. We started seeing each other, slowly, quietly. Fiona was patient, grounded, no hidden agendas. She knew about Gabriella, the divorce, everything. She never pressed for details, just listened when I talked and changed the subject when I couldn't. One night, she noticed the box on my dresser. She opened it and saw the 2 rings. "What are these?" she asked softly. I told her the whole story, from my mother's last hospital room to Gabriella's betrayal, from Javier's lies to Claire's gift. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she didn't offer comfort or platitudes. She just reached across the bed and took my hand. We sat in silence for a while. It was the first time in years I felt peace. Not the loud, triumphant kind, but the quiet understanding that sometimes you survive by letting go. Later that night, lying awake, I thought about Gabriella. I wondered if she ever found what she'd been looking for in all that smoke and chanting and jungle light. I doubted it, but it didn't matter anymore. Some losses you accept not because you stop caring, but because you finally understand they're not yours to fix. I turned off the light, reached for Fiona's hand, and felt something solid, something that didn't ask me to surrender my soul for enlightenment. That's when I knew I was finally free.